episode, we will be talking about light battle tank as to what exactly is the need for such battle tanks for Indian Defence Forces. Also, what are the options here for Indian Army in terms of imports per se, what are the options which we can get from outside, and also indigenous development which is being talked about on the K9 Vajra platform. So we will look at all these aspects, but before we do, let me first introduce all the guests to you, beginning with retired Lieutenant General A.B. Shivane. He is ex-Director General of Mechanized Forces. We also have with us retired Major General Dr. P.K. Chakraborty, our defense expert, and Mayank Singh, senior defense journalist who keeps a track of all the developments as far as these aspects are concerned. Let me begin with you, General Shivane, and let's try by putting things in perspective here. It's not that we're talking about light battle tank out of thin air, obviously, and it is not that this is being considered for the first time by Indian Armed Forces. So what's the backdrop here?
Okay. Let me begin by demystifying why light tanks in the Indian context. There is an operational environment which we are all aware, which is the threats that exist on the western borders and manifested the threat number one on the northern borders. For some reason, unfortunately, we have focused on the western borders and the counterterrorism grade, and therefore there's a reorientation has taken place to the northern border where threat number one exists. Second is the aspect of operational need. Look, the Indian Army operation capability is based on a threat come capability approach. The Chinese threat is at our doorstep, and the threat has manifested in a terrain where you require light, agile forces. That's the capability to be able to dominate in time, force application, in terms of restricted spaces, gaps, valleys, and with agile forces. That's why we talk of a mix of light and medium tanks and integrated battle troops or rapid action forces for the mountains. Then there is the aspect of operational priority because you have to build up your deterrence and there is a factor of budgetary support. So you have to look at value, vulnerability and risk. What is it that gives you a greater value? How do you address your vulnerabilities and how do you address your risk? Now, there is this light tank is something which was there with us always before independence and after independence. Kohima, the Battle of Kohima, the light tank stopped the Chinese interest. Zojila, the savior of Ladakh, it was the Stuart Mark IV, which prevented the Pakis to take over the Ladakhi sector as such. 62, Trishul, troop of Trishul, a troop of light tanks, AMX-13 at Trishul, blocked the Chinese interests. 71, look at Bangladesh, crossing of Meghna. So our terrain has not changed. Certain infrastructure has come up. Threats have manifested in larger time. So in the Indian context, what I'm trying to draw is there is a need of mixed and light tanks somewhat. Second thing, may I just take another 30 seconds?
Please, carry on, General.
Is the aspect of utility of a force. We must understand utility of a force is dependent on deployability, employability, and capability of the force. Now let us look at deployability. Each of these sectors, subsectors in Ladakh, Sikkim, Siliguri corridors have been assessed in terms of tank runs for both medium and light tanks way back in 2009 through a formal military operations study. And I'm aware to have been to all these locations. So therefore, there is an aspect of mixed and medium light tank for mobility in terms of strategic mobility to be able to build up in faster forces, whatever is there to be able to sidestep on its own steam over with narrow turning radius, class 24 tanks don't have to bridges don't have to build up additional bridges, and tactical mobility in terms of agility to be able to quickly go up with a high power to weight ratio. So therefore, an amphibious capability. Lethality is again one factor. Medium tanks have a good gun caliber, which even a light tank can have, but they do not have the high angle firing capability, which is required for a mountain, which must be understood. Fighting tanks in the plains and the mountain is two different ball games. Employment criteria are different. Survivability. Today, the technologies have aided you not only because of Silet, but because of add-on armor which can be done over the existing armor, light active protection system, ERA panels, and agility gets itself. Employability.
Okay.
Let me just talk about employability. It must have a multi-front employability. No, because we have to have a tank. We can't have a tank for each sector. If you have a light tank for the northern border, you can employ it in the plains of Punjab today, which are strewn with obstacle and water obstacle system, which retard your momentum. Okay. Capability is related to victory at least cost and minimum time. Cost in terms of be able to conserve not only your equipment, but more importantly, your men and fighting force. So if you are able to give them a mobile protected platform which can quickly build up in restricted areas, quickly in terms of time, I think, and that's the integrated battle group concept of the mountains. So if you have to look at that capability, then you have to empower this capability by the means, and the means is like tank.
Okay. So this is, quietly aptly summed up by General Shivani, and with three, contexts here: employability, deployability, and capability as well. Before we talk about the options which are there, let me bring in General Chakraborty here also. General Chakraborty, your views on these three aspects, and also we're talking about right now the need for light battle tanks.
Well, I think General Shivani has brought out very clearly these three capabilities, which I would not like to repeat. I would just straight away get on to what the problem is. And as he brought out, that we have got a threat and we have got a capability right now. The threat today is Eastern Ladakh, where I've served. I think most of my tenure has been on the Chinese border or the J&K border, and sometimes I was sent abroad. That is, and then otherwise I was with the Armored Division and the Strike Corps. So it's been a very, very great combination. And luckily I commanded a unit which was a self-propelled unit which went to high altitude and then came with tanks, and I had visions to match with the T-72s. And so these were all issues which we'll put into one, and we'll just come on to certain key areas, and I'll come to a little bit now down to a little bit of terrain. See, broadly when you look at it, we have the Chinese and they have a Type 15 tank which really fits into what he said, a power to a weight ratio of almost 27 to 30. I will not talk about the other capabilities of the tank. He's described it so well, what it did right from Kohima, and he came on right up to, I would say I saw these tanks even in North Sikkim. I just want to say during exercise checkerboard when the T-55s were inducted, and today they are there in Ladakh. Now the point is, which he clearly brought out, having known the terrain so very well, in the portion which is going on, I must share to you, forget a tank. Till this road came up, it was extremely difficult for us to maintain these people by anything other than air maintenance. And when it comes to air maintenance, it means you either get it by parachute or a Mi-26 helicopter, because the other helicopters hardly carry any load. So the light tank becomes extremely important for any operation. Right now, just only on Saturday night, you had what you call, shall we put it, an intrusion again, or whatever you want to call it, a transgression by the Chinese. The reaction which was there, and where you moved on to southern Pangong, so since all those heights are known to me, I'll not get into it. If you today had, as he said, a light tank, you could have done it very well. Your capability becomes much more easier. Whereas if you look at it right now, the tanks which we have over there are good. I would say they are very good. But they have, as we very correctly brought out, a power to weight ratio of about 18. That is whether you take the T-72 or the T-90. Whereas you need somewhere, in the mountains, two things he brought out. I will focus on that. You need, number one, a higher power to weight ratio. And the next thing that you need is a gun which can fire at higher angles. A normal tank far as about, flat 15 to 16 degrees. Whereas you need guns to fire it almost at 42 to 43 degrees, which he correctly brought out. So none of these tanks are able to do this. Whereas the Chinese, the Type 15, is an excellent tank. I must also say, he brought out the Bangladesh war. Bangladesh has ordered this tank. Maybe our neighbor, I don't know for war, maybe basically you can say that they have a problem with Myanmar. So when you look at these capabilities, what it boils down to, I would not come to the type, is something which would, as he said, suit the terrain, something which would be capable. Now, in capability, well, I'll just quickly come on. You have something, either you go abroad or you make it indigenously. I will not come out with the details right now because we'll be definitely discussing it. Now, if you, I will just say the Chief of Defence Staff made an excellent statement, which Sandeep Unnithan of India Today said, anything that we buy has got to be partly Videshi and partly Desi. The first tranche is normally Videshi, and then you follow it by a Deshi. The Deshi will take 18 months to 2 years. The initial, if you take it well, it's only say, let's say, I will not come on to the types. Very few have been inducted even into their ONA. I'll stop there and give the others a chance.
Okay, let me now bring in Mayank here. Mayank, as our panelists pointed out the context, and let's not forget that obviously the present situation might have pushed the envelope here, but in 2009, if I correctly remember, there was an RFI which was issued for almost 200 wheeled and 100 tracked lightweight tanks. The ones which we're talking about right now for the new mountain division. So this thought process, what I mean to say is, has been with the armed forces. Now is the time that we go in for it. Is that the process being talked about in the defense establishment as well?
Absolutely, Vishal. The term which generally the armed forces use, it's called as long-term integrated perspective plan. So what you see today, what you plan today might fructify after 15 years. I mean, that's the range of years the armed forces factor in when they plan for the perspective things, actually. So if you have rightly brought out 2009, there's a RFI and the thought process. So here again, you find out a situation wherein the adversary is in your mountains, lots of actions are taking place, and you are wanting in certain area, and then suddenly you talk of lightweight tanks. Actually, the way both the panelists have brought out, see, the LAC, which is 3,488 kilometers, is actually a very interesting area of and terrain. If you go to east from Arunachal, it starts from the height of 11,000 feet. And when you come to the north towards Karakoram, you reaches 18,000 plus. So in the area, people might be surprised to know that there are kilometers of flat plateau. And interestingly, which is like interestingly, in Sikkim area, if you go towards the bunker area, I mean, huge plain. Then you come to Depsang plain. Then you are talking of Sangor Gap. I mean, these are areas when you had to have a viable option to thwart the movement of the enemy in a swifter movement, in a swifter form. And with the upgradation of logistic capability of the Air Force today, you have already put in your T-90 tanks. With the tanks, lightweight tanks, wherein the weight is low, you'll be able to switch over the theaters and the concepts of mountain, core, which was 17 mountain cores supposed to be brought up. The new concept which is being tested is fast, agile, very full of thrust, is integrated battle groups. I mean, these concepts are coming up, but they will definitely, today if you will plan, it will take another 5 years. You are discussing it today. Good that we are discussing on all those aspects, and people should listen and take quick decisions over them.
Okay. So obviously, this being talked about clearly underlines the need as well. But let's now come to the options which are there as of now and which have been being discussed obviously as well. Let me start with you, General Shivane. Again, one option is the Russian spoot, that is STMI. The other one which is being talked about is an indigenous one. It's being said that DRDO and L&T are planning to go ahead and develop one light battle tank on the chassis of K9 Vajra. So how would you look at our need, our requirements, and the options which are available there? What might suit us?
Okay, thank you, Vishal. Just before I come to the option, one point I would like to highlight on what the previous speaker had said. It's time we stop discussing. 1980, we did trials and we narrowed down to 2 tanks. Then the BMP came and we lost focus. Then 1983 to 1994, the DRDO came up with a BMP with a 105mm gun without the user interface, and it didn't succeed. Then you came out, suddenly you realized 2014-15, the ZTPQ has come up. So there was again a discussion. 16-17, there was a training event, and I was the DGMF from 2015 to 17. There were training events because a large number of mechanized forces got inducted during my tenure. There were training events in Ladakh by the Indian Army and in Sikkim, which after action reports clearly brought out the need again. And then in 2017, I personally had got in principle approval for a tank for the mountains. So the short and tall of it is action stations walk the talk. Now coming to the procurement dynamics. Well, when you come to procurement, you've rightly identified this thing, Swadeshi and Videshi options. You have to have a balanced approach in terms of what are your imperatives and what are your drivers for it. Number one, there is a time criticality. A time criticality which is being generated by op necessity, which is getting critical day by day as we see it. Our deterrence is being put to test, and it does not meet the aspirations. Second thing is that, therefore, we require something light, 22-ton amphibious capability, high-angle capability, able to move on its own tracks, narrow turning radius, class 24 bridge crossability, all those things. So there's a time criticality, number one. Second, as an Indian Army soldier, and I believe I still am because the blood remains olive green, would always prefer to go to war with an Indian equipment. There is no doubt in my mind. But then I have to look at desirability, feasibility, and reality. I can't dream of it and say magic wand and it is here. Desirability is I want an indigenous capability 100-200%. Feasibility, do we have it today? I'm sorry, we don't have it. Our experience in tank building has not been very encouraging too, but that I won't dissuade that. Every failure has some success in it. The reality is that if we want it in a time critical period, I don't think we have much of an option except to go for something which is available off the shelf, indigenize it to our capability and field it fast. If the decision-making process or the decision makers feel that this capability in terms of risk in time frame can be taken and delayed, then certainly go in for an indigenous solution in which the user must be the driver. He must drive the project. It must be an integrated, not a cocooned, collaborative approach. Next thing, we have to look at, like was mentioned, long-term perspective plan. Now, when there's a long-term perspective plan, as a DGMF and each Director General has made his own General Staff policy statement, which is how he envisions the role, the equipment, the employment, the fleet replacement over the next 20 to 30 years. I have looked at GSPS till 2032 and Fleet Management Perspective 2050 and 2060. Now, the T-72, which have come up in 1979, some of it have been replaced. When they are being replaced, why don't we look at 4 to 5 regiments, which is our requirement, being replaced by the light tank? So you're not enhancing expansion, because expansionism and modernization is always conflicting. So you are replacing it with desired capabilities and smarter way of war fighting. So therefore,
Okay.
the options are you go in for a SP model, which is a big question mark because SP and MATE have got their own dynamics, have not proved themselves. So then there is a government to government deal. So if you go with Videshi, this is it. Indigenous capability, yes. We have certain options, like we talked about the
Okay.
Vajra. We
Okay.
talked
So
about
both are the short-term need as
so
well
just
as
to mention
long-term
that,
planning has to be
this
kept in mind.
capability
Let me bring in
exists.
Chakrabarti here. General Chakrabarti, on these three aspects, how would you look at the options which are available, as General Shivani said, from the angle of feasibility, desirability, and the reality?
Well, I think General Shivani and I'm sure all of you have said one thing is, firstly, how critical we are in terms of time. I'll make it very simple. If you are looking at it in terms of time, definitely the indigenous product or the Desi product will take for development 18 months. And then if the user, which I'm very sure I have done, I sat next to the DGMF, if I may say, and I heard, even when I retired, I used to go for every lecture of General Shivani, wherever he gave. I made sure I attended it when he was the DGMF. I can tell you the Armored Corps people are very, very systematic in getting a project through. I mean, say the Tata Crystal is one such example with the Armored Corps Center and school has done. So if you look at it, if you want something immediately, then I'll still say that the DGMF must get the user involved. Like whatever the artillery has got from the United States, we never got it without a trial. Let's not be in such a big hurry that we don't give them some time to look at it, to fire at it, and to come out with the nuances which he very, very correctly brought out. We go in for the SDMI, which you said, a few pieces, I mean to say maybe a regiment, maybe 2 regiments. So these are not issues which we can do in this small sitting. It requires calculations which General Shivani has done up to 2032. You have to look at that document and then piece it. And the second is the indigenous option. Of course, we have spoken of many from 2009. You can go even beyond, but I'll now speak of the current 2 options. And the 2 options are basically you are dealing with the K9 and that which is being made by L&T. Soon the 100 guns will be over by possibly the end of next year, and you'll be having the entire assembly line free. And in this, you've got 2 options. Either you put the 105mm gun or you put the 125mm gun. I've seen the K9, and I must say, not only seen it many times, and been really, and also worked with L&T. Let me put it to you. L&T is one organization which I have worked with, and Mr. Patil, not that I want to take his name, whenever he went to the MF directorate, he used to come to my office. He used to ask for 5 minutes and he spent often 3.5 hours. But he's so dedicated, he's still, I think, one of the main vice presidents, and with DRDO, L&T, and with the Armored Corps. See, the user has to be involved. That is, the DGMF has to be involved. With the user, if you go with it, definitely you are going to get a good product. Choices you want to do between the 105 and the 125, again, the user will take the correct decision, depending on what you want to achieve. After all, this person on the other side has got a 105mm gun, but that is not the sole criterion. The sole criterion is what General Shivani said, so many factors. So between these, you select which one and you do it. And I feel if you're going for you want immediate, get a few Russian regiments, about 100 of them to start with. And then after that, you have the remaining built up with the DRDO and L&T.
Okay, so ultimately the end user has to be involved intricately in the process. Let's have concluding comments from Mayank here. Mayank, from your point of view, what can be the roadmap from here onwards? A mix of perhaps imported light battle tank plus developing indigenously as well on the K9 Vajra platform, which is being talked about. What is it? That is the thought process which is right now going on in the defense establishment.
See, Made in India has got up very, fast actually, and not only fast, people are pushing for that. And one thing is very important, which we have discussed in this program earlier also, that the the strategic freedom which a country can actually enjoy is when it fights its own war with its own weapons. And in this case also, I would like to say, but then having said that, it should not be blocking us, because there are lots of high-tech technology, high-end technologies are involved. I mean, let us divide the same tank into three parts, which is like move, engine, which is protect, self-protection, and for fight, ammunitions. So what are the kind of metallurgy you are going to involve? Is India capable to produce that metallurgy? Is India capable to produce that kind of a Homer seeker or environmentally viable protection suits for itself? That has to be seen, Vishal. India is growing fast. Its technologies are picking up. IITs are building up in their incubation centers. Lots of things are coming up. But still, you will have to involve the foreign organizations so as you get the best of the things which you can get. Russia has been helping us a lot in that. And I mean, there can be mix of things from Russia. Chases can be from somewhere else. The metallurgy for the gun, which Jabalpur has already developed, we can mix up that. So time is not far that we are going to catch up with all those things. We will have to mix up. The bigger thing which needs to be told, and everyone has underlined that, is that when you form a plan, right? If you are saying that RFI was put up in 2009, why does a compulsion drives you to take a decision? You should form a plan. Threat perception should be put into account. It should be evaluated, analyzed, and then chalked out a plan which we follow to the last word. And see, forces require a lot of investment. Capabilities require a lot of time, and time is right. That push is there from the government, and we can come up for all these answers.
Okay, definitely. And it involves a lot of planning out there. And one critical aspect, as both General Shivani and General Chakraborty also pointed out, is to involve